Hello and welcome to our legacy giving session. Now, when we think about legacy giving, we typically think wealthier, older supporters who've been giving to us for a while. And while that might be one way to target supporters for a legacy gift, we believe that legacy pledgers are no different to any other kind of supporter. What drives them to leave a legacy gift is the same as what drives them to make a monthly donation or give once. The the main reason they give to you is their identity and their connection to the cause and their commitment to the organization, their loyalty to you. So when we think of the targeting model to identify the best leads, we don't rely so much on capacity, recent behavior, or age, which can be found on your CRM, but instead we make things difficult again and we ask people a set of questions. So we ask them their identity, which signals their connection to the cause and explains why they give specifically to you. And we also ask them their commitment to the organization. And that's a measure that can predict their loyalty, their retention, their giving behavior overall to your organization. As a matter of fact, these two questions, identity and commitment, should be asked anywhere, anytime to all your supporters. So they could include they should be included in everything that goes out, so you can increase coverage because they inform all of your fundraising, not just legacy giving. But for legacy giving, in addition to those two questions, we also ask them the obvious one: what's your intention? Do you intend to leave a legacy gift to us or not? And people can respond to that honestly, because it's not like in order to appear nice, they're going to make a $5 donation to us. This is a substantial decision, a substantial gift. So they can sit down and have a think, and they already know their wishes towards your organization and towards the cause. So they can tell you if they've already left a gift, which is also very valuable, because in some cases, people leave you a legacy gift, but you don't find out until it's very late, until after they've died. And that way you miss the opportunity to nurture them, which means you increase chances of them not removing the gift from their will, or who knows, maybe they will even increase it. In addition to that, the obvious reason why we ask it is to identify people who would be interested in leaving a legacy gift in the future. So you have your prospects, and now you have the people you need to speak to, and you know their identity, you know their commitment. The other thing you need to know to determine how you speak to them is whether they have kids or not. And the reason we ask that question is because people without kids are more likely to leave a legacy gift, as I'm sure you already know from experience. But here's some data to support this, and you can see that people with no kids, 50% of people with no kids leave a legacy gift, whereas people who have kids and grandkids, that barely reaches 10%. And it's not to say that people with kids are not going to live a legacy gift ever. They do. And but if we know about it, if we know that people have kids, that will determine how we speak to them. And we need to put the emphasis on them and on their family. We need to show them we appreciate them and we value them, and we want them to think of their family first. And after they've done that, we would like them to consider leaving a legacy gift to us. Here's more data from a client, and here you have three different segments: two prospect segments and a legacy lead segment. And you can see the breakdown of parents and non-parents in each of them. What you immediately notice is that when you have a higher percent of parents in the prospect segments, that pattern reverses when you look at the legacy leads. Among the legacy leads, the highest percentage is that of people with no kids, which emphasizes the importance of what we said earlier, that people with no kids are more likely to leave a legacy gift. And we'll see why a bit later on. But again, this also proves that people with kids we're not going to forget about them. They also live legacy gifts. They're interested in living a legacy, but there is a different way of speaking to them. Commitment level. We also measured the commitment level of those three of the supporters in each of those segments that you just saw. And we saw the commitment levels in combination to the answer to the intention to leave a legacy question. So I have left a legacy, I intend to, I consider, or I will not leave a legacy. And you can see that even just by looking at the commitment scores, these go from 0 to 10, and the highest it is, the highest the commitment to the organization. You can see that people with no intention have the lowest commitment, and people who said they either have left a gift or intend to have the highest commitment level. So using commitment as a measure could be very helpful in identifying people who are more likely to leave a legacy gift. Even if you don't know the answers to the intention question, if you have the commitment scores, you kind of know who is more likely to leave a legacy gift to you. A little bit more on that point. Looking here at this table, each row is a different answer to that intention question. And looking at the bottom two rows, we have people who consider leaving a legacy gift, and the last row, people who will not leave a legacy gift. If you look at their giving behavior, like the amount that they donate per year, years on file, number of gifts, there isn't much difference there. So if you rely on past giving behavior to determine who is a good prospect for a legacy gift, you're not going to find much. On the contrary, if you had measured supporters' commitment score, you can see there is a significant difference between the two groups. And people who consider leaving a legacy, their commitment score touches 9, which is very, very high. And people who don't consider leaving a legacy or will not leave a legacy, they have a commitment score of 7. In addition to that, to determine who is more likely to leave a legacy gift or not, the commitment score allows you to create a smarter hierarchy within the considerer segment. What I mean by that, not everyone who considers to leave a legacy gift is the same. They don't have the same capacity, obviously, but they also don't have the same commitment score. So let's look at the group of people who are part of this considerers group. This is a small segment of that of the group of people who consider leaving a legacy gift, and you can see their capacity score and their commitment score. Now, if you only relied on the capacity score, you might have talked to that person at the bottom who is quite wealthy, but has a commitment score of 4. So not very likely to leave you a legacy gift. Whereas you should be focusing on people who are not as wealthy, but have a commitment score of 10, 9, or 8. And those will be supporters who are more likely to leave you a legacy gift. Looking at the identity of those supporters, this organization was a human rights organization. So the relevant identity was being whether you identify as an activist or not. So we asked people how strongly they identified as activists. And again, you see the same pattern in the prospect pool. 54% of supporters identified as activists. At the legacy leads pool, 66% of supporters identify as activists. Once again, people self-select, and people who have a higher connection to the cause, they tend to support you for longer and to leave legacy gifts. Another example here with a different client, a religious organization, and we found 3 different kinds, 3 different ways of relating to that religious identity, rather, purely based on religion, based on the cultural elements that connect the people of that religion, or based on the ancestry elements that connect the people in that religion. And you can see the commitment score of each identity group. It's different, and you can see their intention to leave a legacy gift is different. And more importantly, now that we know how these supporters connect to the cause, we know how to speak to them differently in order to increase their commitment and their intention to leave a legacy gift. But of course, leaving a legacy is not a decision that can be made in one day. And we don't expect with one legacy appeal once a year to make a huge difference. However, we need to think about this as a journey that starts with lead generation or identification of prospects, then cultivation with the appropriate language, and that leads to conversion. So starting with lead generation, you could do this or not. This is another way to another channel that you could use to start finding people who might be interested with content that will speak to who they are. So in this case, in relation to that religious organization that we saw a little bit earlier, we tested a religious identity ad against the control, and the religious identity ad focused solely on the religious aspect. It didn't even mention how you can make an impact or anything. And we managed to increase click-through rate by 53%. Now, you've seen this example before, maybe. The reason I mention it here is because after this, what we did is we started capturing information about the supporters. So the ad was there. It doesn't even need to be a donate now ad. It could be a value exchange ad, anything that you can offer the supporters so they can click on the ad, and then there is this form on Facebook or on the landing page that they arrive, and you ask them these 4 questions: the identity, commitment, whether they have kids or not, and the intention to leave a legacy gift question. This way you have data that comes straight from the supporter, which means we bypass any GDPR laws, and we have their permission to use the data because this is data they shared with us willingly. And most importantly, you have information that explains why they support you, and you can use it in all your fundraising and in your legacy fundraising. Okay, so you have your target audience. You've identified now the prospects based on those 4 questions. What are the barriers to legacy giving? What could you do, and what could you do to remove them? Obviously, people are not thinking of leaving a legacy gift, and that's why they're writing their will. Rather, it's the other way around. During the time that they're writing their will, or they're considering about writing their will, that's when they might also consider including a charity. And when there was a test with this collaboration with a number of solicitors, and they asked them to just ask people if they would like to include a charity that they like in their will. And you can see that in the control condition where no such question existed, and the test condition where we only asked people whether they would like to leave a gift in a charity they liked, the percentage doubled. But of course, that's not something that you can control unless you collaborate with lawyers, solicitors, or maybe if you offer a free will writing service, and then you can include an ask during the process of them writing their will. But there are other things that you can control more directly, and specifically the concern about the family needs, which we already touched upon for people with kids. People with kids will first and foremost want to take care of their family. So if you ask them to leave a legacy gift before you even mention or acknowledge that they have to do that, you're going to lose them. Whereas people who perceive their family needs as taken care of, they have an almost 90% higher probability of leaving a legacy gift, which means that maybe you can also target people who've already written their will, family, parents who have already done the process, and ask them to amend their will to include you in there, because they definitely perceive their family as being taken care of. The other barrier, which is unexpected, is that there are very few solicitations in regards to legacy giving. In contrast to what happened with individual giving, There are very few appeals. And that's something that you can correct, but of course, do not overcorrect and overdo it. You can increase the number of us, or you can include legacy us in other communications. Just make it more prominent, more visible so people can react to it. The other barrier is what we mentioned in the beginning, that typically the audience that is targeted is a wealthier, older audience. However, you can widen the range and include younger people, because the important thing is to catch people in the moment that they're writing their will. And that could be the moment that they get married or they have their first kid. It doesn't mean that people write their will when they're older and only then, or that they're only then interested in leaving a legacy gift. It all comes down to their identity and connection to the cause. That determines whether they want to leave you a legacy gift, and not how old they are or how much money they have. And finally, it feels like a hassle. It's all that legal, um, the legal element in it that makes people feel that it's going to take ages and it's very difficult to do. So anything you can offer to make them feel that it's not such a big deal, like a guide, the free will writing service that I mentioned earlier, testimonials that it's easy, the language that they need to include in their will so that they can just copy and paste it. Anything that you can do to make things easier will increase conversion. Okay, so when you write your appeal, how should you speak to people? Because let's say we removed all these barriers, we have our audience, how do we talk to them? The first and foremost is knowing who they are and playing that back to them. The reason why they support you is the reason why they might leave you a legacy gift. So you need to emphasize your shared values. You need to show them how, by leaving you a legacy gift, they express who they are and what they believe in. And of course, if they have a family, as I said, emphasize that they need to take care of them first, and offer an opportunity to honor a loved one or a family member when they leave a legacy gift. By doing that, you could increase interest in legacy gifts by 14%. Legacy pledgers are not going to be around when their gift is going to be used. So they need to trust the organization in order to leave a legacy gift. They need to know that the organization is going to use the money efficiently and effectively. And they want to know what they have done with previous legacy gifts, how their own legacy gift might be used. They want to know about the longer term, bigger picture plan, to see how we're going to make a difference in the cause that we support. This is in contrast to individual giving, who mostly care about the immediate impact of that their gift could have. So for legacy pledgers, they want to know the bigger picture, longer term impact, and they need to feel secure and safe. The reason why people leave legacy gifts is another way to feel immortal, to feel that you're leaving something important behind. And that's the reason why people with no kids are more likely to leave a legacy gift. Because people with kids, they feel like they've done their bit and they've left something important behind because they procreated. But in addition to that, of course, they can also do something for the work they believe in to continue after they're gone. So that motive is very strong and key behind explaining legacy giving, and it's unique to legacy gifts that can't explain any other kind of giving. People want to be remembered positively. They want to do things for the causes they believed in and extend their self through their work they believe in. But of course, when you talk to people about all that, make sure you don't remind them that they're going to die. They want to do all that. They want to extend themselves in the future. But at the same time, avoid thinking of their mortality. That will turn them off, switch off. And because the fear of death is so strong that it might make them ignore all the other messages. And that's another stat about how 33% of US bequesters are motivated by a desire to be remembered positively. We all do. And the other element you can use in your legacy appeals is a number of nudges to increase motivation. I already mentioned the free will service and maybe an easy guide that will help people feel that it's not such a big task. You can use social norms and you can share what other supporters have done, which is a standard practice, I think, in most organizations to share stories of other legacy pledgers. However, the important thing here is make sure that those legacy pledgers are still alive. That goes back to the mortality reminder. People don't want to associate with dead people. So make sure the quote or the story you're using from a legacy pledger comes from someone who's still alive. Always use simple language, avoid all the technical legal language that might confuse people, and increase people's autonomy with by offering choice. Even the choice to honor a loved one increases that autonomy, or choice over how we contact them will do that. Relatedness is about making them feel closer to you. It's all about your the relationship between them and the organization. So if you know who they are, speak to them in that way, respect their wishes, all of that is going to help in increasing relatedness. Now, here I mentioned a few factors that could influence legacy giving and should be included in the appeals, from supporter identity to the need to live on and extend yourself, feel immortal, trust to the organization, the impact, the different nudges. What do we use? How do we express that? Like, this is an impossible thing to guess. I can't guess at it. You shouldn't be guessing at it. And there are many different ways that each of these factors could be executed. So I don't know if you attended the previous session that I did with Charlie on testing, but there is a methodology that allows you to do A/B testing on steroids. And basically what it does very, very quickly is it starts with this testing grid table where each row represents a different principle, a different thing that you want to test. So in this case, for legacy giving, it should be trust, impact, identity, posterity, and immortality, and so on. And each column should reflects a different execution of that principle. And what the software does is it combines different cells to create different communications. So you can invite your supporters to take part in a very brief survey, and all they have to do is look at the two letters at the bottom right and tell us which one they prefer, the one on the left or the one on the right. And each person is going to make about 10 choices. And by the end of it, you'll know which is the winning element of each attribute. So you know when you want to talk about trust and increase your supporters' trust to the organization, should you share the overhead information or should you share past successes? You'll know which is the way to do it in the context of legacy giving. Now, this slide shows you the use of that methodology to inform consent and how we ask for consent. So we found the winning elements for that, in this case, for this client, and we combined them all in one communication, which we tested against the control. And in this case, the client asked us, this was a digital online donation page. So the client asked us to increase consent to email because that's the easiest thing to communicate with the supporters. And we compared that against their control, and we saw a lift in consent rates to emails. So this is a very quick way to test thousands of different messages around legacy giving and feel confident that the winning elements will perform well in market. So going back to legacy, now you've identified your prospects, you've found the winning language that will increase conversion, and you've secured a pledge. that's not the end of the road. You need to pay attention to the legacy pledgers, as I'm sure you do, because that's when people start paying attention. Like this is a quote that expresses that idea. When I was giving just a few pounds a month, I didn't really pay much attention to what they sent me. When I changed my will, I guess I needed reassurance I'd made the right decision. And now I read everything they send me. And also people might start become more, a little bit more demanding. So they feel the need for you to respond to them, to every query, to show an interest. So as this person said, it was a really big thing for me. I think the least they can do in return is answer my letters and be prepared to call me if I have any queries or concerns. So getting a pledge is not the end of the road. And that's why it's important to ask the intention question, because that will allow you to identify people who've left you a gift, but you're not aware of it. And that will allow you to nurture them and steward them in a way that will increase their likelihood of keeping that gift in their will. And here's a list of things that as a recommendation you can do to nurture legacy pledgers. Keep them up to date about successes, be very responsive to their needs, mention and make sure that if they rewrite or update their will, the gift is not gonna be lost. Reflect who they are and their beliefs, and give them choice over what they receive and how. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I have a request to share the study research where the two stats on the previous slides came from. Is that the stats, the 33% of bequesters gave when they had the opportunity to live in memory? And are you referring to those? Okay, yes, I will. I'll add them on the slides. I'll add a reference on the slides before we share them. Are there any questions about the legacy? Okay, I don't see any more questions. Please contact me if you think of any. If not, thank you very much.